Ladies and gentlemen, friends, colleagues and listeners, here we are again. We've got another podcast. We're right early in 2021 and we've got a different subject matter. We've got an expert, and I say an expert, who loves to be positive about what's happening in the industry. And as far as media is concerned, the impact that it can have is so important. So we're joined today by Jane Stanbury, who's the owner and president of the Arena Group, and she's based in Montreal, and she's joining us today. So Jane, thank you very, very much for your time.
Chris, thank you for having me. It's good to be here.
Really appreciate it. And genuinely, Jane, the times that we've had interaction, I got to say, you come across so clear, so direct, and so positive. It's refreshing.
That's
seriously.
I try my best.
No, but seriously, because one of the things that I want to ask you maybe a little bit later on is, why the media in our industry, we're very good at telling each other and telling ourselves the stories and what goes on, but maybe not projecting it well enough into the general public. But what's happening with the media outside in the general public, they're so negative about everything. But
yeah, I don't know whether it's historical or, I mean, the media have always loved the airlines and what they can offer the passenger and the changing nature of it. We love to hear stories about Emirates and its butler suite in the air. That's all very positive. But the minute you start talking about private aviation, it becomes very negative. And I've never really understood that, because private aviation does so much for economies. It does so much for, it actually, gets people directly point to point to keep businesses going.
Yeah.
Commercial airlines, of course, are really important, but I think there's been a real missing link between the two and how they actually do complement and support each other. But yeah, the commercial airlines they're getting a bit battering at the moment, as are business aviation. So
yeah, and not much support from the politicians either.
No, not at all.
No, terrible. Right, now, as we get into it, just so that people can get a little bit of an appreciation of your background, can you just give us a little bit of an insight into how you got into aviation? Because obviously I know that you've been in media, and also we'll talk about the luxury travel sector that you've been in. But how did you manage to get into aviation? So just a little quick insight.
A plotted summary. So I started my career in media in London with the Independent newspaper and then the European. And then I went into academic publishing, strangely, but it was super interesting. And consequently, I founded a .com with 4 others.
Yeah.
And we launched a business that was very academic. And after about 20 years of this, I thought, no, I want to get something a bit more fun. So I left, took an MBA, and went and set up my own luxury travel company, which was based out of Mallorca in Spain. No vested interest, obviously, living on a nice sunny Mediterranean island.
Yeah.
It was all about knowing about the destination. And that luxury travel company, it focused very much on quality rather than volume. So I would have very few clients each year, but they would really come and enjoy their break while they were with me. And as a consequence, many of them came in by private jet. Mallorca is one of the busiest, or Palma is one of the busiest private jet airports in Europe in the summer. Yeah. A lot of my clients arrived there. So I got involved in that whole sector. And I've always loved travel and I've always loved flying. So that was interesting. And then Alison Chambers from Emerald Media contacted me to ask if I could help with a press trip. She was working with a company that wanted to demonstrate that business jets were a great way of having a quick, short break with your friends and family, making it convenient. And could I help her with the ground arrangements? And I, of course, was very interested in that. And the minute we met, we just got on super well. And as a consequence, I started working with Alison. And very quickly, I found myself a manager to look after the travel business. And I pretty much dedicated my time to consulting for Alison and working with her. So that's how I got into aviation. So I have Alison much to thank her for.
Brilliant. Now, and obviously we'll come into that now because of what's going to happen with private aviation in 2021 and what happened in 2020. But what I just want to ask you now is, with all the areas that you've lived in, so you've lived in the UK, you lived in the States, in New York, you lived in Mallorca, also Japan, and now you're based in Montreal. That general overview of different cultures, different locations, etc. The impression you've had now of general aviation, it's pretty consistent, isn't it? Because one of the things that we've been trying to do is letting people know what a great industry it is to come into. And if you've got a certain skill set, based around an aircraft as soon as it lands on any tarmac or takes off. As soon as you've got that down pat, well, then you've got something that you can take with you globally, and it's the same everywhere.
Yeah, it is. I mean, the cultural differences are, they are noticeable. So if you start in the US, using private aviation, it's completely acceptable. It's the right thing to do. It's the way to get business done. Okay, Obama might have had some questions about that, but we all know about Cargate, and actually the reality is business aviation really adds value to economies. That's wherever you are in the world.
Yeah.
You come to Europe, there's a little bit more reticence to say I'm using a private jet. There's a certain discretion required. You go to Africa and it's like, whoa, look at me, I'm using a private jet. Traditionally, until I would say maybe a decade ago, in Africa, it was truly the domain of the oligarchs and autocrats. But now it's becoming much more of a generally accepted, effective and efficient way to move around the continent. You then get to somewhere like Japan, where everything is about being seen to be doing the right thing for society. There's no real word for I in Japanese. It's all about the society, and the use of private jets there is just really minimal. And those companies that have them often base them on the west coast of the States rather than be seen to be having them in Japan. I think that might be changing. I think with kind of more globalization, I think the acceptance that Japan's a mountainous island nation. You either get somewhere by train or you don't really, or you fly. And for businesses, they need to fly. So I think that is changing a little bit. And ASBAR has helped a lot with that, as have some of the big industrial names that we recognize, like Universal there. So yeah, it's been very interesting to see the differences in culture and their acceptance and use of private aviation around the world.
Yeah, no, definitely. And now you mentioned as well about education, and you specialized in crisis communications and risk management with your MBA.
Yeah, I did. Yeah, it was. I'd always had my media head, so when it came to doing my thesis for the MBA, I thought I'll do something that I think actually I'm quite practical in the big scheme of things. I like to be able to do things and make things happen, and it seemed a really good idea to write a paper about how, if you have a crisis, what's the best way to communicate with the media throughout that crisis. And there are some very fundamental lessons to learn, like just be honest, just tell the truth. If you don't know something, say you don't know, be visible, be seen. I mean, we have some classic examples of how not to do it. You look at the BP disaster and
oh no, oh god, yeah. So no, I didn't mean to laugh at that, but yeah.
Classic example of how not to do it. Then you look at, there was the air crash, I think it was BMI, and the CEO was out on the site of the crash in his dressing gown and pajamas as soon as he could get there. So it's, there are very basic ways of doing it, but people are always scared, I think, of being judged. And that's why you sometimes don't get the full truth. And blame, we live in a blame society. We're all ready to blame. And you look at the COVID situation, we're out to blame wherever it originated. We're out to blame. There's nobody talking about the positive stuff and how people are being really, really helpful and positive. Healthcare workers worldwide, what a life they've lived the last year, and no one really gives them the credit. So our blame culture, I think, has a lot to answer for.
Yeah. But let me ask you now, okay, so obviously with crisis comms and risk management, if you look, and it's very easy in hindsight, but if you look back on 2020, and if you look at the lack of focus on sustainability of the business and more focus on how the business was growing and revenues, instead of margins, and and how much of a safety net did each company have, that's proven now to be something that people have to take into strong consideration moving forward. And I also believe as well, if you're going to work for a company, you want to work for a company that is a good, solid company.
For
and
sure.
I think that's going to come into it even more now, because if you look at people who had jobs and through absolutely no fault of their own now, they've been displaced, their families have been inconvenienced, they're under a lot of pressure, but through no fault of their own. And a lot of that is as well because some companies going into the pandemic were not performing as well as they should. And then there's question as to why they should be allowed to continue to survive when it's good companies that should be coming out at the end of the tunnel and having the benefits from that. So as far as crisis and risk, what do you think are the lessons that should be learnt now from last year?
Well, I mean, the big one is, and this was something that I learned when I was writing my paper, is that of the top Fortune 100 companies, when this was a good few years ago, I won't say how many because it'll age me too much, um, only about 30% of them had crisis plans.
Yeah.
And it's always a case of, oh, it's not going to happen to us.
Yeah.
So I think companies need to be prepared much better than they were for crisis. Crisis can come in any form. It's anything that alters your day-to-day operations.
Yeah.
Um, I know a couple of my companies that I work, they had crisis plans and they were able to use them to structure how they responded. So it needs better planning. Companies need to be prepared. They need to realize that there are going to be bad times as well as good. It happens to everybody, whether you're the largest OEM in the world or a small independent company. And preparation is key. Just
Yeah.
knowing, sitting down and thinking and giving time to thinking, what if?
Yeah.
I'm sure very few of them had pandemic on their crisis plan, but you can take the elements and use it. So preparation is key. Managing your teams, managing your staffs. I know I saw some real innovation from various companies on how that they could keep their staff without having to let them go. So that was either deferring payments, confirming that, they will have payment, but it might be 6 months later than normal.
Yep.
Or there was another company I saw. What they'd done, and it was really smart, they'd invested in training each person to cover at least 2 or 3 different roles.
Yep.
So as they moved through the crisis, they could adapt so that some people who might be doing a service job could move to a practical maintenance role during the crisis when more aircraft were coming in for maintenance. So companies that have thought about it and thought about, okay, if something bad happens, what can I do? If I lose half my staff, if my customers can't pay me, do I have deferment plans in place? Can I support that? And that's really, to manage risk and to manage crisis is about being adaptable and responsive. And that's really what businesses should be looking at for the future. I also think companies should be looking at, what do their customers want going forward? We talk all the time about what we think they want. How often do we talk about what they really want?
Yeah.
I mean, how do we communicate with them? I work with a company called Seafell Group, and he specializes in researching what the voice of the customer, what the customer wants.
Yeah.
And it's amazing how there's always a bit of a dichotomy between what the company thinks the customer wants and what the customer actually believes they want. So, I think now is really crucial that you get to know what your customer wants in this changed world.
100%.
I think that's really important.
Can I ask you as well, and just in general terms now, why do you think so many managers, obviously they focus so much, and it depends on what they consider to be the length of their tenure in that position, but they focus so much on the immediate, like the revenues and immediate targets that affect them, rather than them considering that they're a brick in the wall of the future success of the company, so that whatever their legacy is has enhanced the company. Because so many, it's very obvious, you talk with them, you look at what they do, they don't want to get involved in the detail, and they don't want to get involved in, quality, safety issues. They're happy to see what should be done, and they're happy to see the documentation in place, but they very seldom validate that it's there and then verify that their part of the organization is actually delivering it. And it's only then when something goes wrong that people start wishing they had done something, knowing what they could have and should have done. And then, like you said, resulting in a blame culture whereby they try and find out who they can blame rather than, let's move forward together and do it properly.
Yeah, take it on the chin. Yeah, I can't say that I think it's more the nature of the world in which we live. And that's something that COVID's really highlighted, is that perhaps we all just need to slow down a little bit, slow down, look around us, see what we've got in front of us and how we can best optimize and maximize that. I think demands are very high for companies to perform well, to succeed, particularly those that are PLC or incorporated. They have shareholders to please. And I think all that plays into the senior management not really having necessarily the time to focus on the detail. So I don't really think it's their fault. I think it's just the nature of the world in which we live. We're an instant gratification world, aren't we? Twitter and all the social media, it's there and then it's gone. Whereas at least in the old days, you'd read a newspaper and you'd probably have it around for a day, then it would be fish paper. Whereas now Twitter, you've got your 10 seconds of fame and then it's passed on. So So I think that really affects how corporate culture works these days. But that's not the same everywhere. You know, I see companies that are very focused on the detail, particularly emerging companies, new companies. They want to get it right.
Yep, yep, and their commitment is not because somebody tells them they have to. It's genuine.
Yeah.
And the point that I feel is important is the employees who are on the ground. They see what the messages are coming from the management, and the most important thing is that those messages are credible and are respected. If there's a lack of respect or a lack of appreciation, and they know that commitment isn't genuine, then that then reflects in the service, and absenteeism and accuracy and costs and damage to facilities and equipment. Just daring to care. And if people know that their companies are committed to caring about them, I genuinely believe that they care more than about their companies. And I think that's something that the media can capitalize on, by saying, look, if you want to start a career, or you want to be sure, you now should be looking for companies that you feel satisfy your requirements and your expectations, not that you should just be pleased to have a job.
Yeah, and it's true. And you do see that. And that's a very, there's I call it the old fashioned culture, where you have like the boss at the top.
Yeah.
Whatever he says goes, doesn't listen to anyone around him. And then you have the more inclusive companies, which I think are the ones that do well, because they will listen to their teams. They will listen to what they have to say. They'll take that input and think, yep, okay. And then they'll ask that person to run with that idea.
Yeah.
And those companies will be the ones that continue to succeed. And the media are, the media tend to focus on a limited number of companies, I find, the general media, not aviation media. But it's the same old names you see all the time. Whereas I wish they'd just look a bit broader, because there are so many companies with so many interesting corporate cultures or approaches to the market. And okay, they might not be the big ones with the massive marketing budgets, but they do well and they survive, and they're still here because of the way they've led and dealt with their company structure.
Yeah. And when you were doing crisis and obviously risk, it's one thing to have a risk assessment. It's another thing to have some mitigation plans.
Yeah.
But the biggest thing is to make sure that those mitigation plans are being carried out, and that they're effective, and that they're making a difference. And the same thing with just having self-assessments, internal audits, reviews. It's okay for the top management to say, right, I need the business to do this, and this, and I need to see it's in place. But it's even better if they say, right, now I'm going to verify that it's effectively in place. And I'm now going to check all the way back down to the bottom again. So you get your upward validation and your downward verification. I just wish organizations would be a little bit more focused there, because then you're going to get much more people within your organization focusing on a similar way of maintaining the business, because it's going to maintain their lifestyles. It's going to look after their families and everything else that comes from it.
Yeah, I mean, it's the above and beyond syndrome, isn't it? If you have someone that you've invested in, they will invest back in you. If someone treats you well, a kind of an anecdote that I use, which is not aviation related, is the Montreal bus system. Once upon a time, the buses here were really uncared for. They were grubby. You didn't want to touch any bit of the bus.
Yeah.
The drivers were so grumpy. They would see you running for the bus stop, and they would just keep driving. And there was
slow down a little bit just so you got closer. Then
pick up speed just as you got to the door. Yeah, and it was great. It was just horrible, and nobody was having a good time. And it got called into question by the local government, and they cleaned up the buses. They smartened them up. They gave the bus drivers nice uniforms, and you know what? The bus drivers are really, really helpful now. The passengers are much happier, and everyone uses the public transport more. So it's a really small version of make the environment comfortable, make it nice, make it somewhere that they want to be, and they will give back to you. Yeah. People are nice inherently. People are inherently nice, and they want to do the right thing. That's human nature, actually, at the bottom. Okay, you're going to get some exceptions there, but on the whole, people are good people. And if you treat them well, they'll treat you well.
Yeah, no, I agree. So now, as somebody who's in media and somebody who's good at, shall we say, writing a story and describing what's happened and putting your own color and your own tunes into that particular story, please tell me now, why is it that the general media, and I'm not talking about aviation media now, because that's on a different perspective, but why is it that general media is so negative about things, because with the greatest will in the world, irrespective of which government, none of them could have done what they would like to have done now, looking back when they first started in this pandemic. So they're damned if they do, they're damned if they don't. And it's the way people are responding around them. So whether you're in a society where you're told to do something and you do it, or you're told what you should do, and then you have to decide whether you do it, which one's right, which one's wrong, you can't tell. But why do people focus always on the negative?
I think media in general, the competition for eyeballs is just so fierce, and you're not just competing with other newspapers these days, you're competing with a million TV channels and social media. A story about something, just a general story about how someone does a small good deed, is rarely going to be published in media. Negative headlines always win out, and that's why the general media have a tendency to move towards that way. That's more of a headline grabber than others. And then they kind of self-perpetuate that. The story continues and they keep talking negatively about the same thing. Other media then pick it up. And so it becomes this kind of cycle, if you like.
Yeah.
When I first started in media, in the UK, I know, and in the kind of international newspapers, there were people that were dedicated to aviation, and that was their area of expertise. So they were much more likely to report the positive. These days, there's probably a transport editor.
Yeah.
If not, it might be a news editor. So you haven't got people that are so close to the industry. They're less familiar with the characters, with what's going on in the industry. And consequently, you very rarely see positive stories coming out. And perhaps that's our fault. Perhaps it's my fault for not getting in touch with them more, saying, look, guys, I've got a client and they've done this during COVID. I have one client based in Africa, Dawit at Crimson Aviation.
Yeah.
And during the start of the pandemic, he worked really closely with the World Health Organization. There was one flight where he got a whole bunch there were people flying in on Ethiopian Airlines. He was then making sure they got on another Ethiopian Airlines flight to get home. You've got interlining between the commercial area and the business aviation operator to get people home. And what's more powerful than getting people home to be with their loved ones? I mean, it's just, you don't hear any of that. You don't hear about the business aviation owner who's given over his aircraft to deliver urgent PPE to medical staff. You don't hear about the guys who said, take my jet, use it how you need to get people from A to B so that they're with their families. Or people are still sick, not with COVID, and they still need moving around. And without the commercial carriers, that's been much more of a challenge. The medevac's been much more of a challenge. So, business aviation has been stepping into that. So there's lots of really good news stories, but it just doesn't get, there's even, I think the one that really struck me, and credit to the BBC for reporting this, that the Oxford AstraZeneca researchers, in the middle of their research, they had some partners in Italy, and they actually said that, without the use of a private charter, they would not have been able to get samples from Italy to Oxford within a certain time frame, which was needed for the project to be sustainable. Business aviation is doing that, and media just don't talk about it very much. But what I see endlessly is someone tried to breach the regulations by flying from Germany to Cannes.
Yeah.
I don't have an operator as a client. If I did have an operator as a client, maybe I could have stepped in. But I think as an association, the associations perhaps could be doing a little bit more. I know they've been really busy at just trying to keep the industry connected and communicating with them, but maybe their PR teams could provide a top 10 list to the media, the general media, of what did business aviation do in 2020 for COVID.
Yeah.
That'd be a really interesting story, and people would be fascinated.
I think so.
So I don't know, maybe I should talk to them about it.
Yeah, no, you should. And I'll tell you another idea that we should do, Jane, is I used to live in the States as well. I lived in Atlanta. Okay. And
interesting place.
No, it was good. But I loved it there. But when I was there, I can remember reading the story about there was some sort of exercise that was done between two colleges, and it was done with volunteers, and they had to do certain really, really boring work. And then they had to be together, and they had to spend a certain amount of time together, and it was done during the holidays and stuff. But the only difference is one group had to read a newspaper from front to back within their leisure time. Same for the other group, but one newspaper was full of positive news, the other one was full of negative news.
Okay.
And the group that read the negative news, they started having more arguments with each other, didn't want to spend time with each other, and felt lethargic and headaches and stuff. And the other group said they made friends and it was a great thing. And whenever I look through a newspaper now, some of the things that make me smile or make me think, oh, that is lovely, I prefer that than all the other, and why does somebody not just start a good news daily?
Well, I know The Guardian on a Friday, they send out an email, which is, I can't remember what it's called, but it's all the good things that have happened that week. And there are some amazing stories.
Yeah.
Think, why isn't everyone reporting on this?
Yeah.
It's just astounding. But people, someone sent me this really funny, entertaining cartoon earlier in the year about media and how, this media here reports something negative. This one over here then reports something more negative.
Yeah.
And everyone's like, oh, shock, horror. And it's just that people believe as well. I think it's much easier for people to believe what they read than think about what they read. And consequently, people look at it, believe it, go away, repeat the story. And it is what sells newspapers. It's what sells media. It's what makes people turn the TV on. But actually, we need that good news. We do need good news too. And that's why we're always happy, like you say, when we read that story about someone doing, I had a tear in my eye when I read about the Wingman project in the UK, which is the airline crew started by a female airline pilot. The project was sending in airline crew to support NHS staff. I think they're still doing it. And I saw earlier today on their Twitter, they're still looking for volunteers to go in and just help the NHS, make a cup of tea, make them lunch. When they come in, they don't have to think about it. It's just there for them. They're not there to do medical work, but they're there just to support. And there's been 5,000, I think, airline crew going in to help in the NHS in the UK, which is just amazing.
That's brilliant, isn't it? Yeah, wellness and well-being, and also just the use of positive, nice words. So I was telling you earlier about the Qatar. We care.
Yeah.
And cleverly spelt with a QARE, but it's a nice image. It's something nice that when you see it, you think, okay, that's really good. And then you got Etihad with the Hope Project. Those words just change the way people, just respond to each other and everything. And, whereas you've got everybody slamming, like I know you've got a soft spot in your heart for private aviation. But, the amount of criticism it gets and people jump on the bandwagon, with sustainability and carbon footprint and everything. But for sustainability, there's 3 words behind it, which is planet, people, and profit. And you can't have one without the other. And you can't just focus on one element without the other 2. And in some cases, you've got to be able to be profitable to do some of the investment, and you need people to be doing certain things. So it's an all-encompassing subject matter. It's not just about having a pop at people that you think are doing a bad thing. And we did a podcast. We did several sessions with private aviation, and one gentleman, he was brilliant, and I really liked him anyhow. But when I asked him a question, his face changed a little bit, and he said, "Why should successful people be ashamed of success?"
Was that Steve by any chance?
Pardon?
Is that Steve Rossano?
It was indeed, yeah. I think he's a great character. Yeah, but he's, you know what I mean? I really, do you know what I'm saying? He's his own man. He's got his own style, but he does things for the right reason.
Steve's great. I really admire the way he just says it like it is. So
yeah, I really enjoyed that session with him, and he was so to the point. And someone that I know very well, they always used to say to me, "You've got to go a long way to see a poor man offer others jobs, and you need people to be successful to help other people." So why, when somebody becomes successful and is doing something, why knock them?
Yeah, it's a really cultural thing, isn't it? I mean, you look at America, that's the land of, the self-made man and woman. And you're not knocked there. I mean, I was in sales for a while, and selling in the UK, it's a really tainted thing. You don't say you're in sales. If you're a salesperson in the North America, people really admire you because they realize it's a tough job.
Yeah.
And that's all related to the success. I think, again, there's all sorts of reasons, but for me, business aviation is an economic driver. Yes, there are the 1% that use it just to holiday from place A to place B, or they use it to fly to somewhere for a particular meal. they are a tiny, tiny minority of the users.
Yeah.
The majority of people, I mean, you know, we talk about flying on a private jet. If you're on one of the smaller jets, it's actually not hugely comfortable. If you're a, you know, average
Exactly.
size person,
Exactly.
it's
Yeah.
really not all champagne and strawberries. It's really not. You're up early in the morning, you're flying, you're working while you're flying, you land, you get to your meeting, you get back, you go, not, you do way more work in one day using a private jet than most people would ever do in a week. And that work drives economies, it drives people's jobs, it drives people's ability to have their home, to live the lifestyle they want. It's really, it's not just a plaything of the rich. And it drives me nuts when I talk to people and they go, oh yeah, well, that's just for the rich kids, isn't it? It's like,
Yeah,
no,
but it's no different. It's no different than celebrities, you know, blocking off a restaurant or a venue or having a top band play for them at a party. It's all part, it's all relative. If they've got the money, who of us wouldn't do things maybe like that if we had the opportunity? But I just think it's wrong to be criticizing a part of the industry that also provides work. So you've got caterers, you've got fuelers, you've got people
so much
working
more.
in FBOs. You've got everything there, and it's they're all making a living as well and supporting everybody else. So it's all part of one big family.
No, it's huge. There was the former chair of the Civil Aviation Authority in Nigeria, Papa Demoren. He once said at a conference I was at, which is it was a quote that's always really stuck with me. I can build you a mile of road and I can take you 1 mile. I can build you a mile of runway and I can take you across the world. And I just thought that's so true. That's what aviation does. It links us together. It brings us together. It brings opportunities. I mean, Africa, the aviation industry in Africa, the last decade has just taken off incredibly, even business aviation, because it's such a vast continent. You
Yeah,
cannot actually get from A to B quite often without flying.
yeah,
The logistics, the roads, there just aren't any. There are no railways. And I don't know that if people are aware, but the freedom of flight in Africa is very difficult. So if you're in Angola and you want to get to South Africa, you might actually have to fly to Europe to then fly down to South Africa because of the freedom of flight and open skies policies or non-open skies policies. So private aviation in Africa is often the only way people can actually do business.
yeah,
It's not for anything else but doing business.
yeah. And Africa's got such huge potential.
Massive, massive. I mean, the economies, I don't know what the current, but I know last year it was 7 of the world's 10 most quickly developing economies were African, with Ethiopia in the lead.
Yeah,
The resources are phenomenal. The people are great. They're so dynamic. They really want to get things done. And yeah, the potential is enormous. And that's what's driving business aviation growth in Africa as well. The international community is realizing that there's a lot of opportunity there.
yeah,
And with the right investment and right partnerships, you can do really well.
yeah. No, 100%, 100%. So now, with regards to personal habits, and also there's going to be a hangover with regards to consumer confidence and the sanitization issue. So even once the vaccines and everything starts to lighten up a little bit, hopefully, please God, in Q2, people are still going to be a little bit hesitant to do things the way they used to. So further afield, you mentioned, but also, the touch points are still going to be a concern for people. And when you look at the difference in the touch points of legacy carrier and private aviation, it's like 10 to 1. So, if it's 35, it's 350, it's 400. So those are the things that people, I think, are going to be focusing on. So how do you see the habits of people changing now when it opens up again?
In terms of business aviation, I think you'll find that people that have, I've heard all sorts of different stories, and I personally do not get to fly on business aviation, unfortunately. So I rely on good old fashioned commercial legacy carriers, but from clients that I know, media that I speak to, I hear so many anecdotes of people that have moved across from maybe first or business onto the private jet and using business aviation. I've heard of, my favorite tale, I think, is a guy that lives in Florida was saying how many of the CEOs that have retired to Florida, and they were probably used to traveling by business jet in their working life, have now either bought a pre-owned or are buying hours.
Yeah.
And they're also, if they've bought an aircraft, they're buying hours for their family because they don't want their family to fly commercial.
Yeah.
A company I work with in Europe, Virtus Aviation, have been telling me that they're not just seeing people that have flown traditionally on first and business, but just new entrants, new young entrepreneurs that are actually still doing very well. They want to travel using the benefits, but they don't want to own an aircraft. They want to, there's a move towards the sharing economy. I mean, that's why, the net jets of the world are doing quite well, and why Wheels Up just, I mean, Kenny Dichter got that timing just perfect with Wheels Up.
Yeah.
Not using flash aircraft, but getting aircraft, moving around, moving people around,
Yeah.
share community. There's a new one in the States, Jet It as well. They're coming to Europe with Jet Club. So there's all sorts of sharing aviation options. And people are moving to that. Those that can afford it are moving to it, because it's not as ridiculously expensive as people think as well. I mean, it's not cheap, don't get me wrong, I get that. But for some, it's affordable. And here in North America, Costco apparently are now offering the chance to join a membership club. I think it's 17,000 to join, and then I don't know what the fees are. So the gap between the opportunity and the ability is narrowing, I think. And I think you'll see more of that going forward. I think with the introduction of hybrid, with the VTOLs, that gap will reduce. So I think post this pandemic, and I think post-pandemic, we're not talking this year, we're talking 2 years down the line, I think the way people fly will be different. It's not going to all be long haul flights. It's going to be shorter flights using the VTOL. VTOL will deliver the possibilities for the first and last mile, taking off the roads. I think people will seek to fly hybrid aircraft or electric aircraft if they can, particularly maybe not my generation, but the next generations down. They're much more conscious, I think, than perhaps we are of that. So I think their needs will drive that development going forward, which is great.
People are a lot more focused now on the value of time. And at the end of the day, do you know what I'm saying? It's one of the most valuable things every human being's got. You can't borrow it, lend it, buy it, put it in a box and save it. If you waste it, it's gone. You're not going to get it back. And definitely. So I think from a business perspective, even sending groups of managers somewhere on private aviation rather than, and you do spend a lot more time, on the normal travel. So I think they're doing that also for their own safety and security. So I think the habits are going to change big time. And I'm pretty sure as soon as it opens up, everybody will want to do that lifetime experience. Every year. They'll either go for longer or they'll go with, people that matter. And then once they've done that lifetime experience, they're going to want to do that at least once a year and make memories. And why not, because if anything, this pandemic has shown how fragile life can be. And, how, it's crazy to waste every opportunity. It's, you've got to get out there and be positive and do what you can.
Yeah, I mean, I was never in a position to have children, but friends of mine that have kids and they've been working from home, they've said it's just been great. We've been able to spend time with the kids. We can, get a bit more involved in their education. And I'm kind of sitting there thinking, why didn't you get yourself in that position before? It's almost like it just had never occurred to them that this is something that was important.
Yeah,
I mean, the pandemic has maybe slowed us down and made us think and appreciate what's around us a bit more. Just simple things like liberty. Yeah, I mean, I don't know about where you are, but here now we're not allowed out after 8 p.m. at night. It's a lockdown curfew. That's something that you hear of in wars, right?
Yeah, it is.
And yeah, it's going on around us here. So
yeah, well, here in the UK, I mean, most of the world is looking at what's going on here, and it's either here or the States that's making the headlines at the moment. And what's going on here, a curfew might not be a bad thing, because people are expecting that they need to be tougher, to get through this quicker, because people are just not paying the right level of attention, which is a huge shame.
Yeah, it is really. The figures are 1 in 50 in the UK have now got COVID or have had COVID, which is just astonishing, really, for a civilized country, that's got a developed nation that has a fantastic healthcare system. I know it creaks under the lack of funding, but it is an amazing system.
Yes, Jane, and it's actually, in my opinion, it's the best in the world.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. Having lived in many different countries, it's just, I don't use the word very often. It's a bit overused here in North America, but it is awesome.
Yeah, and everybody involved in that front line, it's a word that's probably used a little bit too much and too often, but they really are heroes. It's incredible. They should. And please God, we're saying about what will happen post-pandemic. People mustn't forget.
No, I really hope that people don't forget. I hope we don't just go back to the way we were. I'm an optimist. I'm ever the optimist, but I'm also a great believer that change is good. Change of even painful change has a good outcome if you take that opportunity. And I just really hope that we do as we move forward, whether that's to appreciate our healthcare workers more, appreciate each other more, appreciate our lifestyles more, all of that. But we have to carry on working. We have to keep on, driving economies and making sure that our business is sustainable, but only if we have a sustainable planet. And that's a really key thing going forward. The green, the hybrid, the hydrogen, all of this really essential.
Yep, we need to dare to care.
Dare to care, Chris.
Dare to care. And we've got to start a positive news magazine or newspaper just to get people, give them a little bit of benefit. See, look, there's positive. Look at that. You're getting a delivery now of refreshments. And how nice is that? Look, put a smile on your face and mine. And I wish I was there to have a cup myself.
Yeah, that's my rather wonderful husband, Tim. Who,
there you go, Tim.
I'm in Montreal, actually.
There you go. That's perfect.
Yeah, he's well known around the industry too, because he was an aerospace engineer at Bombardier, which is how we met originally. So.
Okay, very good. Well done, Tim.
Thank you. Thank you.
I knew there was a reason I married him, Chris.
There you go. There you go. He'll buy the T-shirt now. She married me for my cup of tea. Right. So now getting back now, if you had the chance now, what would you like to see as the main stories in 2021?
I would like to see the general media talking more about the positives of aviation, particularly business aviation.
Yeah.
And I'm actually quite inspired from our conversation to maybe have a chat with MBAA and EBAA particularly. I'm looking forward to seeing the development of the new propulsion, whether it be hybrid, hydrogen, and which aircraft, there are so many in the mix at the moment, which of these aircraft do come to fruition. I think it's great. I'm loving all this new technology, the supersonic, the hypersonic, the VTOL. It's great. It's going to change our industry. It really is, and for the better, I think.
Yeah, and there's incredible innovations and products and technology, digitization. It's great what's going on, and like we're talking about journalists and editors, and I got to say, some of the depth and some of the knowledge and some of the stories that are covered by the specialists within aviation are fantastic. And I take my hat off.
Bunch. I feel privileged to work with them. There are some great, and I think they've had, for media, it's tough. Their subscription model has been eroded by the internet over the last decade.
Yeah.
And then, they rely obviously on advertising, so they have to keep producing content that is interesting.
Yeah.
The last year has really seen them adapt and modify and change and create some great ways of interacting. So I think of Alan Louise Whyte at CJI with their town halls that they started, and they started those really early on.
Yeah.
Their virtual conferences. I looked at the MBA V-Base. That was a technically challenging event, but good on them for getting that going and providing another platform to interact. I look at Ava with the podcast, starting the Business Aviation podcast. That was great. Av Week, AIN, they've all developed new ideas to keep people communicating, because right now we can't communicate any other way except through social media and in the trade media. And that's why they're so important. And I really encourage anybody watching this who's in a business aviation company to consider how they can support the media, because the media have just done a really good job over the last year.
Yeah, no, I agree. And some of the digital events we've done, it just makes you, it makes you feel very proud and very humble when you see so many really genuinely nice people who care about their profession, their companies, their colleagues, and what they do. And then you also, you listen, or you listen sometimes, but you read a lot of what's been written. And some of the people I love to just to go through what they've done. As a couple, Alex, I asked you, did you know Alex Lennane of Loadstar? I always enjoy everything that's in there. And another lady, Thelma Etim from Air Cargo I. They really put a lot of time and energy and they engage in the stories that they write. And, you know, without those stories, you know, we wouldn't know what was going on. And, you know, I take my hat off to them. They do a great job. And, you know, I think the whole community should support the media, especially the specialist media, more, so that they can keep pumping out all those good stories and let people know what's going on in the industry.
Yeah, I mean, really early on in the pandemic, when I could see it was going to be a bit of a long term, this wasn't going to be a short bout of this disease, I said to my clients, you know, it's really important we keep communicating and keep supporting the media, because they are basically our window to the world now. You know, we can't see each other at events. Not everyone can log on because of all the time differences. So media really is the way forward. And the media have been fantastically supportive as well. So, you know, a shout out to all the media that might be watching this as well. They've done a great job.
Yeah, 100%, 100%. So now we're actually almost at the end. So coming back again, what would you like to see as the major stories of 2021? If you could have a crystal ball, or if you could influence it, what would you like to see as the headlines of our first edition of 2021 Positive News?
I would love to see a headline that says business jets moving COVID vaccine around the world to meet demanding deadlines. That would be a good one. And I know that there are some business jet companies that are doing that now.
Yeah.
So thanks to them for getting that vital serum out there. I would love to see more about green technology. I watched a really alarming program from David Attenborough, which was his notebook of his life. It was on Netflix.
Yeah.
And it's really shocking just how much damage we're doing to the world.
Yeah.
And with a few simple changes, we can really change the. So for me, the green without the greenwash is what I want to see. I really want to see the industry continuing to make an effort, and headlines around that, whether it be through new propulsion technology, new types of composite materials, whatever it takes to make our aviation world more sustainable.
Yeah, here. And here's to the first edition. We'll have to think what we're going to call it now. Positive News. We have to do something, you know, did you know, or whatever, but we should do something.
Yeah. Keep on flying. Keep on trucking.
Yeah. Keep on flying.
No,
keep on flying. Keep on trying. But listen, Jane, thank you so much. You're a very positive person. I've thoroughly enjoyed the times that we've interacted, and also what you do for all of your clients. Well done to you as well. So thank you so much, and wish you the best in 2021. I think it's going to be full of a lot of positive surprises.
Yeah, I think one thing is, you know, out of the ashes, many phoenixes arise. And I think we'll see a lot of really interesting, new, innovative businesses arising in the next year. Yeah. And I wish them all luck.
Yeah, please God. Exactly. Yeah. More success to as many people as possible. And for those that have been inconvenienced, displaced, or hardshiped, please God, they'll get back to normality as soon as possible.
Yeah.
Dare to care. Dare to care.
Dare to care, Chris. Dare to care. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Jane. Appreciate it.
Take care.